we're so excited to be doing something live. It feels normal, a little bit more normal. And we're really excited to have Hi here with us today. And to start off our series on spirituality in the wilderness. So everybody knows who Hi is. He really doesn't need any introduction, but I'm going to have him introduce himself anyway. Hi, welcome back from the wilderness. Thank you for being here with us, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to kind of kick this off, right after I came off. For those of you who don't really know the full story behind the hike, we hiked the Appalachian Trail right after college was over. The time worked out perfectly, and we left in early June and just finished about 3 weeks ago. And that trail is a little over 2,100 miles, and it goes from Katahdin in northern Maine down to Springer Mountain in Georgia. And we hiked it in kind of an interesting way. It's called flip-flopping. And so it's when instead of starting at one end and going all the way to the other, we started in the middle and went from the middle to the northern terminus and came back to the middle and went to the southern terminus.
Wait, so that's
we did that
hiking, isn't it?
Say that again?
That's extra hiking, isn't it?
No. We didn't. We drove back to the middle.
Okay.
I guess, yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
That.
Really, you went down and then back up and then back down. That's impressive.
Yeah. It was, our original plan was to start in the north and go straight down to the south, but they had closed the park in Maine when COVID hit until early July, and so it just didn't make sense for us to wait that long.
Sure. So it's a long hike. It's one of the hardest hikes in the country, from what I understand. It is not for the faint of heart.
It definitely is a huge physical challenge, but I think I told a lot of people this as we were walking, but I think after you're there for a little while, especially if you're not starting in the really challenging parts in the north, after you're doing it for a week or two, you're kind of in the shape to be able to continue to do it, because there's so many different paces at which you can go and the different timelines that you can carry on. So I believe truly that anyone can do it. I think it just depends on how fast you're trying to do it. The Appalachian Trail especially, there are definitely some tough areas and very technical hiking, but I think that there's no stretch that I think no one could get on.
Was there a moment when you were on the trail where it kind of dawned on you the scope of what you were doing? Because this is a big hike. This is a big venture out into the wilderness. Was there a moment where it just kind of dawned on you, oh, I'm in this?
Yeah, I think the first big moment where I realized kind of the enormity of the task was about 2 weeks in. We had to come off trail for a little while for an injury, and it felt like we had been so far. And after we came off, we were kind of like, sitting up in a house thinking about what we'd done so far. And we looked at a map, and we'd done like a tiny little piece on this massive map of the whole trail. We already had to come off from an injury. So it kind of seemed at that point really like it was too big of a task, but we were determined and got back on, and that was really the only big hiccup during the whole hike.
Nice. So there were injuries, there were setbacks.
Yeah, early, but after one kind of bout of that little injury, we were very healthy and took much better care of ourselves. After that, we were much more cautious. I think the injury really came from overuse and just thinking that we were in better shape than we were and hiking way too much in the first few weeks. So after we kind of dialed that back, we were able to be pretty comfortable with every one of our days. And then we kind of, ramped ourselves up to being able to hike the longer days.
So you're hiking in the middle of the pandemic, right? I mean, did that change how you were hiking or how many people were on the trail? I mean, famously, the AT is a pretty heavily trafficked area. Did you feel like the pandemic was something that was happening way far away in another world, or was it there on the trail with you?
In some ways, I think we felt pretty removed from it because we went full days without seeing people. But the fact that we went full days without seeing people was really unique, because most years on the Appalachian Trail, I mean, there are thousands of through hikers, so it's not an isolated task. And so more than any other year, I think we were staying in shelters or at campsites alone. We, like I said, would go without seeing other hikers and definitely other through hikers throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean, remember, I've done a tiny section of the AT was out there for just a few days. And it was striking because all of the through hikers in that little cluster kind of knew each other and kind of knew each other's stories.
Oh, yeah.
And so it sounds like you had a bit more of an isolated experience. Did you find community on the trail at all?
Definitely, yeah. Especially when we were going north from the middle in Pennsylvania up to Maine. We met a lot of people because a lot of those folks had paused their through hike in the South, came off when COVID was at its worst right at the beginning, and then started to kind of trickle back on and finish their hike. And so we were able to connect with some hikers there. We met a lot of people. This year was a big section hike year, which is folks that do large swaths of the trail, like a whole state or something like that. And so we met a lot of those people because the timing worked out. A lot of people were not working and things, but it really was pretty lonely at times, going through the South, because after we finished in the North, the big bubbles of the northbound hikers were no more. And when we came to the South, we were so far ahead from the southbound bubble, which is all the hikers coming, directly south, that we would go multiple days without seeing through hikers. And that was when it got pretty lonely.
So I want to come back to that, because I think that might be a good place to dive into what our real topic is, with the spirituality of the wilderness, because I bet that has a lot to do with at least some to do with your experience. But we've got a couple of questions I want to get to. As some of you know, there's a whole culture of the Appalachian Trail, especially among through hikers. And one of those pieces, I'm sure you've been asked this before, is that everybody tends to get a trail name. And so we've got a couple of questions. What were your trail names? Why? And how did you get them?
So mine was Highway, and that was pretty self-explanatory. I think after people, yeah, when we first got on trail, we would meet some hikers, and they'd ask for our names to try to figure out something to give us a trail name. I'd tell them that my name was High. And they were like, "Oh man, like that's so cool. You're not going to get a trail name. Like there's no way to like improve that." So that was kind of a bummer. So we went with something that was close to my real name. And Mayra was Sore Dog because she was the one with the injury. She hurt her foot, and so we called her Sore Dog. So
SORE, not SOAR.
Yes, SOREDAWG.
I thought maybe she'd been so far ahead of you on the trail, she was like soaring ahead of you to new heights.
Sometimes.
Well, so part of the reason why we've asked you here, High, is because we want to talk about the spirituality that happens when we're in the wilderness. It's different for everybody, but almost everybody who goes into the wilderness for any certain amount of time, whether it's a day hike or months for a through hike, tend to come out of it having had some kind of experience where they feel like they got closer to God in some way, or maybe more distant from God in some ways. But you engage with things in the wilderness when you're away from modern society that you really don't have a chance to otherwise. So I'm curious for you. I'm sure you weren't like John the Baptist and eating locusts and honey in the wilderness, but maybe you were. I don't know. Maybe you were wearing camel's hair. But what was it in the wilderness? What drew you to the wilderness first, and what did you find there?
Well, I think that my draw to hiking has kind of always been there. I grew up really active in the outdoors, camping with my dad a lot growing up and backpacking.
You did camp
and then
too, right?
Right, and then working at Camp Henry's Outdoor School, and so all those experiences kind of set me up well to be successful when I was in the wilderness, and kind of be comfortable, which is not the normal comfortable, but be able to feel confident that I'm going to be able to take care of myself, I guess. And so being having the opportunities to kind of get on the Appalachian Trail here and there, and know what it was, really made me want to complete this like really large task. And I think the opportunity presented itself after graduation, and then especially when we had to come home with the virus, and my time was really free, and the planning worked itself out. And so I was really excited to kind of get out and leave college on a really positive note, and have a very large task, and also a large task where there was a specific end goal that I knew I could get to, and I was really motivated to get there. And then I got out there, and I think the thing that I found most of all that kind of didn't meet my expectations was that motivation to get there was in and out. I like really had to seek that motivation every day, because while if anyone followed us on social media or anything like that, when they saw we posted all these really beautiful pictures and really amazing places, but those were like the highest high points. And then like the other 75% of the trail is just walking in the woods every day. And that seems
I'm not saying there's panoramic views like every step of the way. There's
right. Yeah, right.
forest you're walking through.
Yeah, and some places like I said there are, and it's beautiful and it makes sense while you're doing it. But then there's so many other places where you're just walking through the woods, like, what am I doing out here? You know, and I think that surprised me, and I think that challenged my confidence with being able to complete it. And I think that's what I found, and that's also what strengthened me. And when I look back, that's what I kind of say was like the both negative and positive aspect from the hike.
Yeah. So as I said, I've done this like really small section, and I've never done more than like 3 days out on the trail. But my motivation was always trying to catch up to everybody who was like a couple of miles ahead of me, who I was hiking with, because I was always the one in the worst. But as you're out there in the wilderness, you've got some community, you've got some isolation. What was your engagement with your spiritual side like in the midst of that? Like, were you conscious of engaging with something spiritual? Were you in the midst of kind of we think of going out of the wilderness and having these wonderful, beautiful experiences like you're talking about that happen, in small chunks. But
right.
What is the mundanity of the wilderness like as far as the spirituality goes?
Yeah. So I really do think that people hike the Appalachian Trail because they're called to, and in their own personal way. You have to have some really significant motivation to actually want to do that and live outside for that long. And I think that people are, like I said, are called to for very different reasons. And I think for me, it was kind of an opportunity, like I said, to set really specific goals and to be able to find that kind of really simple success in what I was doing every day. And
Whoop, I just muted you. I'm sorry. There you go. Sorry about that.
No, it's I think because I saw it as a calling to go hike, I saw it as kind of me following along God's path. And that was that gave it a lot of meaning when I was hiking. And when I was at the high points and the cool views, it made sense. And I was like, wow, like I'm doing, what God wants me to do right now. I'm following the right path for me and kind of exploring this calling to hike the Appalachian Trail. And then the other 75% of the time, I was like, God, man, why am I out here? Why did you call me to walk this way and to be in the wilderness and not have access to all the creature comforts that I'm used to? Because you think, or at least I think, of a calling from God as being this, really romantic thing where it's everything's going to click and it's going to be, easy and
to solve your problems.
You're going to see like the beam of light coming down to show you which way the trail is and everything. But sometimes it's not. And I think that is where I struggled the most, to ask myself why I was out there, when sometimes I felt like I maybe had misinterpreted this call, and maybe I shouldn't have actually hiked, and I'm wasting my time by walking in the woods every day. But I think it's those moments, for me, it was those moments when I was at my lowest that I had to remind myself of kind of a really common saying along the trail, which is never quit on your worst day. It's practical and it's reasonable in that you can't actually quit on your worst day because you're in the middle of it. You can't just walk out. You don't
have a choice but to keep going.
Right. But also, I think I think it helped me realize that a true calling, a true mission, is one that allows you to find fulfillment, especially in the end, but at various parts throughout. But it's also something that's going to really challenge you, because without that challenge, you're not growing. And I think that I realized that I felt that call to hike, not only for the experience and for being alone and having a goal, but for all the growth and that I was able to kind of receive through the process, and really, my ability to take on challenges, knowing that I feel like I can do anything now, and being very confident after something like that.
I love this idea of never quitting on your worst day, because I think all of us have had experiences, whatever we're doing in our lives, or we've had a really crummy day and it's been really awful, and we've thought, maybe I should do something else, or maybe we should pick up and move, or maybe we should do something else. But you're sitting there on the trail, you don't have an option, you've got limited amount of food and water. How do you kind of push through that? How do you keep focused on putting one foot in front of the other? Or do you just
really? I think, I think it's I think it requires you to kind of refocus, and so I would really, when we were hiking, a lot of the times we would listen to music or podcasts or audiobooks, because it did get kind of mundane, and we could talk, but we couldn't talk 15 hours a day, every day.
You're interesting, but you're not that interesting.
Yeah, right. So yeah, anyways, we listen to things, and I could kind of distract myself, and I did that for almost the entire trail. And then in North Carolina, which was in the last week and a half, I stopped listening in those times when I got either really bored or really bummed out, and we wouldn't talk, and I would take my headphones out, and I would just kind of allow everything to really be quiet. And this was in the fall, so there wasn't a lot of wildlife and things like that. And I really liked that, and I honestly couldn't really tell you why, but that was where I was able to kind of refocus, because instead of asking for distraction, I was asking for purpose, by kind of welcoming in that silence and that loneliness, really, because we would hike separately sometimes, and so I would hike alone in silence, and that's kind of where I would feel like I was realizing that purpose again. And that's when the trip didn't seem so long, and the end point didn't seem so far away.
I feel like you preached like just 12 sermons just in what you said right there. I mean, there's such profound wisdom in that idea that, think about in the pandemic, how many times we've heard people say, wow, I'm so glad I have a Netflix subscription and I binge watched this, that, or the other. And, how many times am I looking forward to the Mandalorian episode on Friday to, get me through my week or whatever. But this idea that to stop chasing after distractions and be willing to embrace the loneliness, and to be willing to embrace the silence and even the boredom, and something profoundly developing inside a soul when that happens. If that's not a spiritual insight of the wilderness, I don't know what is. It's a fantastic thing to be thinking about, particularly right now, I think, in our world, where it can be really easy to fill our lives with distractions, and to be able to set those aside and down, and embrace solitude and embrace loneliness, and to trust that God's going to be there. It reminds me of that, the famous passage where Elijah's standing on the mountaintop, and God's not in all the bombastic thing and the fire and the thunder and all the very distracting things, but is in that sheer silence. We talk about it being a still small voice or the whisper, but it's actually, silence, God being in the silence. What a fascinating thing. So you mentioned creature comforts. What were the creature comforts that you most missed that maybe we would be surprised? I mean, we assume, modern plumbing, we assume a bed, but was there something that you're like, boy, I wish I had a little Debbie oatmeal cream pie right now?
If I missed food, it was healthy stuff, because we did not eat healthy whatsoever. We were eating the oatmeal cream pies and the candy and whatnot, because it was just about getting calories. So we would eat a lot of junk food. But I missed sitting in like a chair or a couch and watching TV or reading a book or something like that, because there are no chairs out there, and that's kind of something you don't think about. No, there's this phenomenon around hikers called trail magic, which is when people will bring things like food or drinks, or leave a cooler on the side of the road some days, or things like that. And there are trail angels, which are people who spend significant amount of time doing trail magic, driving to different parking lots to meet hikers. And one of the things that trail angels do is they'll set up a stand and make hamburgers and hot dogs and hand out drinks, but they'll have chairs. And the first time I saw it, I was like, that's kind of ridiculous. Like, I've got a little thing I can sit on. It's no big deal. But I sat in the chair and I was like, wow, this is amazing. You know, that's one thing that I really didn't think I'd miss. And then one thing that we were, I guess, kind of lucky with is there's phone service on basically the entire Appalachian Trail, save the really, rural areas of Maine and New Hampshire. So I think a lot of people expected us to be way more out of the loop than we were. And I think I kind of wanted to be more out of the loop, but I still, I didn't use my phone much through the day other than listening. So I certainly was off my technology more than I usually would be, especially given kind of my norm during the pandemic before we had left. But that was something that, yeah, like I said, I didn't really miss as much as I thought I would.
Well, so speaking of trail magic, besides the chairs, do you have a trail magic or a trail experience like that you just thought this is the greatest thing ever? I mean, I've heard stories of people just having huge barbecues at, trailheads and things like that where you can meet up with. And I can only imagine like that feeling a lot like making it to heaven, after being on the trail for so long and having limited food and you're like, oh, I can smell a steak.
Yeah, it's a really good feeling. We had probably our best trail magic. There was a trail angel, his name was Iceman, or his trail name was Iceman, and he supported us for 3 full days. So he would meet us in the morning and we'd have breakfast, and then he'd meet us at night and we'd have dinner, and he'd take our packs during the day, which some people would say is not like purist hiking, but we still touched every mile. So
that's a great gift.
It's a great gift. Yeah, it's called slack packing. And
I mean, just if you've ever hiked with a full pack for, a couple of days, the idea that you could then continue, I mean, that just, you cover more ground, you feel better, like your spirits are lifted.
Yeah, it was like our first days in the White Mountains, which are I would say the toughest part of the trail, just the largest mountains as far as elevation change goes. And those are in New Hampshire.
Okay.
But anyway, so he supported us through the day, and that was a really cool experience because we would have the barbecue in the evening, and we'd all sit around in the chairs, and there'd be lots of hikers because it was in the northern half. But I think the trail magic that kind of like fits what you were talking about, the feeling of going to heaven, was all of those trail angels that we would roll on by accident. We would just kind of walk out of the woods, and there'd be someone with a big stand with candy and sodas and things like that. That felt good because we weren't expecting it. Or like walking up on a cooler in the woods. Those were like some of the, or I guess at a road crossing, not the woods, but those were some of the best feelings, because sometimes the coolers were empty, and that kind of was a huge letdown. But finding little snacks in the woods and things like that to kind of help you through made a huge difference. It was just immediately boosted morale, because we ate almost the same thing every day. So any sort of diversity in our diet was more than welcome.
So what was the High Garst, Appalachian Trail diet?
Oh man. Yeah, so if you want to hike the Appalachian Trail and leave a lot weaker than you started, you should eat 2 cups of oatmeal in the morning, a couple Cliff Bars through the day, every single day a tuna wrap for lunch. That was my favorite thing. And then almost a full bag of chips and some peanut M&Ms.
Well, and that's protein. That's protein.
Yeah, right. The lunch was the only time I got protein, and then for dinner was like rice or ramen or pasta. It was pretty good. I've not really had a really strong.
Sounds like kind of like how I ate in college.
Yeah, I don't really have much of an urge to eat any sort of rice, pasta, or tuna now, but it did the trick when we were hiking.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So, part of our series during Advent is the spirituality in the wilderness. And so I just want to note kind of at the outset that the wilderness is this huge place throughout the story of Scripture. So we've got the Israelites who wander in the wilderness for 40 years as they search for the promised land. You've got Moses speaking out to Pharaoh, asking Pharaoh to let his people go out into the wilderness to celebrate a festival. You've got the prophets who are often in the wilderness. You got Jesus who goes out into the wilderness. The wilderness is this, recurring theme in the Scriptures. And I'm curious if that was something you were aware of going into it, if you felt any connection with it, or if it's something that you feel called to kind of engage with and explore now on the other side of it.
Yeah, I think I've definitely thought about this idea of wilderness a lot through my time in college. I studied religion and I wrote a couple of pieces on, um, engaging wilderness and different religions, stuff like that. And but anyways, I think that a really common theme uh, throughout a lot of the stories around wilderness is the sense of isolation, and I think that was kind of what it was for me. And so our decision originally to go southbound and then to make this flip flop hike work was because we didn't want to be in this large bubble of people that usually come north. Because I
Well,
think that
obviously thought through that to experience more isolation.
right, yeah, because I think there are two well, there are a lot of reasons that people hike, but there are two ways that people really choose to hike, and it's in large groups in a really social setting or away from that. And I think that's a decision that you make for yourself. Uh, a lot of people make it, once they have their first little like trail families, they decide if they want to stay with them for the rest of the hike or not. But for us, we kind of decided that we enjoyed seeing people, but we also liked to not be on someone else's schedule and to be able to find isolation throughout the days. And so we chose the route that we did, and we also chose our daily plans to kind of push ourselves on certain days and allow ourselves to be alone,
Yeah.
because I think that was really important for the experience of hiking the Appalachian Trail. The first guy, Earl Shaper, that hiked the Appalachian Trail was probably the only one out there because there was not a trail and he was just kind of walking through the woods. And that's the experience that's supposed to be recreated. But I felt like if I was going to engage in wilderness for that long, I wanted to make sure that I gave myself time to be alone and to feel like I was on my own, or we were on our own, to be able to be like, we were self-sufficient and we were figuring this all out ourselves. And I think because we did that, I felt like our experience was, it was more focused on the environmental aspect and the personal growth aspect than it was on the social aspect. Yeah. Although we did take advantage of, a lot of friends that we made on trail.
Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. And so I want to give everybody a chance to ask questions if they want to. So I'm going to take you off spotlight so that we can, so I can see folks. And if my co-hosts see people raising their hands, please let me know. But I know Scott has a question that he'd like to ask you. Hi. So go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, it's so great to be with you this morning. As you're talking, I think that often one of the misnomers about being outside, going into the wilderness, is that we go to, find God in a way. And yet what usually happens, at least in my experience, is that God finds me. It's like, I just went to the beach, and it was all this rushing to get there and so on and so forth. And you step out onto the beach, it's like, oh, God's already here. I didn't have to go find God. I mean, this is just amazing. I mean, you're talking about the angels that show up. You're talking about, when you were talking, I'm thinking to myself, God kept showing up for you. I mean, and that's just my own personal reflection. I don't know if you had any sense of that as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I think I went into the hike, and I think a lot of people do this, but when I went into the hike, I wanted to know, everyone asked why you were doing it. Why are you hiking? Why do you want to do this? And I wanted to have a really good answer. But I didn't. It was hard to articulate because I just wanted to do it, and I felt like it was what I was supposed to do, and that seemed like a bad reason to lots of people. And so I made some stuff up sometimes, or I would, just kind of dance around the question. But I think that you're exactly right. I didn't really know why I wanted to do it until I got out there, and like I said, it was in those moments, on the top of the mountains that I got it, but it was also in those moments of silence, of solitude. I felt bummed out, but I realized because I felt bummed out because I was supposed to be going through a challenge, and I was there for a reason. And it was those moments that brought kind of both, pain and also excitement for the future and what came next, that I was able to kind of find the calm to be able to take a step back and say, I know why I'm here, why I'm doing this, and I want to keep going and I want to finish. Which is a hard thing sometimes to say that I wanted to finish, because sometimes I felt like I didn't want to finish. I wanted to just get off the trail. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. Sometimes you need to get out there before you can realize what the next step is.
Do you have other questions for High? Other questions for High? Seeing none, I'll ask some of my nerdier questions. What was your favorite piece of gear that you took with you? And what was a piece of gear that you wish you had? And what would you recommend to anybody who's going out for a long period of time to make sure you have, besides toilet paper?
Let's see. The piece that I liked the most was probably my sleeping pad. I liked my sleeping pad a lot. It was very comfortable. It packed down well. It was light. That's really, that counts a lot. The thing that I didn't have initially, but I actually found someone had dropped it on the trail, and I found one and put it in my pack, was a little piece of foam to sit on. And it made, I always thought they're like $20, which I think is just way too much for a tiny piece of foam. And I was like, I'm never gonna buy one of these, but I found that and I said, okay, I'll try it out. I loved it, and I'm going to spend the $20 if I ever lose this one, because I really would recommend it. Just being able to separate yourself from sitting on the ground makes a huge difference.
It's amazing how much heat you lose just by like it, without an inch of foam.
Yeah, you just feel a little more humane too, sitting on the, sitting on something instead of just, plopping yourself down on the ground.
We got another question in the comments from Connor. What did you do in your darkest moments to get through? And then another question from Debbie: were you ever scared? So what did you do to get through your darkest moments, and were you ever scared?
Yeah, so for my darkest moments were definitely those moments that it was either raining or it was a really boring day on trail, and you were just in the trees all day and there were no views and things like that. And those were tough to get through, but I got through them, I think, through a combination of both talking it out. I was really lucky to have Mayor there to be able to kind of, talk about the fact that I was not having fun today. And then being affirmed, just like her saying, it's okay that you're not having fun today. I mean, that was a huge help. And the other part would be distracting myself from it. And like I said, I ended up really feeling better if I didn't distract myself from it and I let myself kind of get into why I wasn't having a good time. But for a lot of the trail, it helped temporarily to just plug in and just buckle down and finish the day. Because at the end of the day, like if it was like pouring rain and super cold, we were still going to get into a dry sleeping bag at the end of the night and things would be okay. Which is why, you don't want to quit on your worst day, because you're probably going to wake up in the morning and be like, well, I was probably overreacting or something like that.
It's like it goes around like the world's not ending, just go take a nap and you'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. And Debbie, my biggest, I was definitely scared on multiple occasions. Most of them had to do with wildlife. We got a couple close calls with a bear. Our third day on trail, there was a bear in our campsite. You're supposed to hang your food, and we hung our food almost every night except the third night, because all the other hikers don't hang their food. We were like, well, we're real thru-hikers. We're not going to hang our food either. And then the bear came in and told us that was a bad idea. So we were pretty good about storing our food after that. But that was basically it. I think I'm trying to think, but weather was never really, I mean, it rained a lot, but we were never in a really precarious spot weather-wise. There were some days where we had to hike later than we planned and it got dark, but there was one morning where one of our headlamps went out and then it was really dark. We had no way to kind of, light everything around us. That was a little freaky, but that was, nothing really scary except for the bear.
All right, two more.
Actually,
Go ahead.
I have another good story. We were in Virginia, and there was my mom just texted me about this. That's how good of a story it is. And so May woke me up at like 3 a.m. because she felt kind of a spooky aura about the place. And she looked it up on her phone, and there had been a double murder in the shelter like 20 years earlier. And so I kind of shook it off and was like, this is not a big deal. But whatever this spirit in the area maybe was present. And so we had to get up at 3:30 in the morning and keep hiking because it was unbearable.
All right, we've got 3 more questions coming in. Just a reminder to everybody that we are recording this. So if you've come in late and missed parts of it, we will post this on our YouTube page later. So a quick question: how many miles did you hike each day? About?
Yeah, roughly 20.
Wow. And 2 more questions. What are your plans for the future? And were you able to hitchhike into town with the pandemic happening? Which is actually a pretty good question.
That is a good question. I'm going to skip the plans of the future for now. I'm going to come back to it. And yeah, so we did hitchhike some. We relied on trail angels for rides into town. We called folks that we knew in the area. So we kind of, we use a lot of different methods. With the pandemic, it definitely posed a different, both a risk from our end and also just a challenge because it was harder to shop and get to and from town and things like that. And so we were able to make it work. We definitely were wearing masks and being as careful as possible, but we relied a lot on people's willingness to help. And in these trail towns and the communities around the trail, it's a pretty common thing to drive through and see some hikers with a thumb out on the side of the road. And so most times people would pull over and they were really clear about their expectations. They were like, hey, you have to ride in the back of my truck. You have to wear a mask or something like that. And of course we obliged. But it was the goodwill of all the people in those communities around that kind of helped us to be able to make our hike work. I think that it would be really, really challenging to do a whole hike and not rely on anybody else.
So we have another question before you get into your plans for the future, which if you need to take a hard pass since your parents are on here, that's totally fine. Did you make a fire most nights? No.
Yeah, we made up like 5 total fires in 6 months on the trail. Because you get in, I mean, we woke up at like 5:30 in the morning, and we would get into camp about 6 in the afternoon. These obviously changed with the sun only being up a couple hours a day now. And by the time we were there, we sat down, we made dinner, and I was ready for bed. We would be in bed by 7. And so it didn't really make a lot of sense to make a fire because I would much rather be sleeping than just sitting around on most nights. There were some like really beautiful places we would want to sit out and look at the stars or make a fire or something, but most nights being in bed was like the highlight of the day.
Well, folks, it is 10:15. I'm about to have to kind of transition my way up to the nave to kind of get ready for our worship service, which begins at 10:45 on our YouTube and Facebook channels. And if you're a visitor here, have been invited by Mayor or High, we invite you to join us there as well. We're going to try doing this throughout Advent. We will not make the same mistake that we made this week and have the meeting be on the same channel as our Godly Play meeting. Thank you, Beth Chestnut, for rolling with the punches really quickly at 9:15 when I figured out the mistake I'd made. So we'll get that sorted out for next week, and that's great. But thank you, High, for being here. Thank you for sharing this experience. It was fabulous and it was wonderful. So grateful for your time and for sharing your experience. Thanks, y'all, very, very much.
Thank you. Great to see everyone. Look forward to seeing you all next week too.
Next week, we have Jessica Forbes LaFiles, the new director of Camp Henry and outdoor programming. So please join us to hear more about spirituality in the wilderness. Bye, y'all. God bless.
God bless.